The phone slipped from her fingers and fell onto the carpet. Marina stared at it as if it were a grenade with the pin already pulled. And before we continue, friends, write in the comments what city you're watching from and what you're doing right now. It's interesting to see how far our stories travel. The voice on the line was still saying something, but she no longer heard it, only the ringing in her ears and the pounding of her own heart echoing somewhere in her throat. Especially to her husband. Why especially to her husband? She picked up the phone with stiff, uncooperative fingers and pressed it to her ear, but there were already short beeps. The screen showed the time, 7:12 a.m. Yesterday they buried Paulina. Her little Paulina, who had just turned 6 and wanted so badly to live until September 1st so she could go to school with a new pink backpack and a unicorn pencil case. Marina had bought that backpack back in May. Paulina chose it herself in an online store, poking her finger at the screen. "Mom, look, it sparkles. Like real magic." Now the backpack lay on the top shelf of the closet in the nursery, and Marina didn't know what to do with it. Throwing it away was impossible. Looking at it was unbearable. She sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. Gray wallpaper with a barely noticeable pattern. James had chosen it, said it looked more respectable. Paulina didn't like that wallpaper. She wanted something with bunnies or clouds in her room. But James said that was childish, that a girl needed to get used to adult life. Adult life. Marina gave a crooked smile. What adult life now? Paulina would never make it to school, or to graduation, or to her wedding. She would never have children. Never call her mom to complain about her husband. Never come over with a cake on her birthday. None of that would ever happen now. Marina pressed her palm to her chest, trying to quiet the pain that was growing inside her like a black hole. She heard the sound of running water from the bathroom. James was taking a shower. He had gotten up earlier. Through half sleep she'd heard him in the kitchen, clinking cups. An ordinary morning. As if nothing had happened. As if yesterday they hadn't stood over a small white coffin, as if Marina hadn't thrown a handful of dirt onto the lid, as if it had all been a dream. She looked at the phone again. An unknown number. She hadn't even had time to remember it. The morgue attendant. An elderly man with tired eyes and heavy hands. She'd seen him only briefly when she came to identify the body. He was the only one who didn't say the standard phrases like "our condolences" or "time heals." He'd silently handed her a glass of water and held her by the elbow when she swayed. What could he have seen in the records? What records? Security cameras? Marina didn't understand, but she felt it was important. That it changed something. And what he said especially about her husband, that changed everything. James came out of the bathroom, drying his hair with a towel as he walked. He was wearing sweatpants and a tank top, still damp from the shower, and he smelled of his expensive cedar-scented gel. Paulina used to call that smell like a Christmas tree. He looked at Marina sitting on the bed with the phone in her hands and frowned. "Why aren't you sleeping? The doctor said you need rest." Marina swallowed the lump in her throat. "I can't." He nodded, as if that was the answer he'd expected, walked over, and sat down beside her. He radiated warmth and freshness, and for a second Marina wanted to bury her face in his shoulder and cry, like she used to, back when he still knew how to comfort her. But something stopped her. Maybe the words of the morgue attendant. Maybe the way James had behaved at the funeral, collected, businesslike, almost routine, as if he were burying a distant relative, not his own daughter. He said the right things, shook the right hands, thanked people for their condolences, but Marina never once saw tears in his eyes. Not once. Not when the coffin was lowered into the ground. Not when the priest read the prayer. James stood straight, his face like stone, only his jaw clenched so tightly that the muscles jumped under his skin. "He's grieving in his own way," Marina's mother, Barbara, had said then. "Men don't show emotions. That doesn't mean it doesn't hurt." Marina wanted to believe that, but she couldn't. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. "You need to eat," James said, standing up. "I'll make some oatmeal. Or do you want eggs?" Marina shook her head. "I don't want anything." He sighed. "Marina, you're going to exhaust yourself. You can't not eat at all. And how am I supposed to eat when Paulina is gone?" Marina looked up at him, her voice breaking. How am I supposed to do anything? Get up, walk, breathe. James looked away. I know. It's hard for me too. But life goes on, and we have to dash life goes on? She stared at him in stunned silence. James, we buried our daughter yesterday. Yesterday. And you're saying life goes on? He grimaced, as if she'd said something inappropriate. That's not what I meant. God, Marina, I don't know what to say. What do you want to hear from me? Irritation crept into his voice, so out of place, so wild, that Marina actually recoiled. He noticed her reaction and immediately pulled himself together. I'm sorry, I'm on edge. I'll go make breakfast. You really need to eat. And he left the bedroom, quietly closing the door behind him. Marina sat on the bed for a long time, staring at the closed door. The words kept pounding in her head, especially her husband. Especially her husband. Especially her husband. She took out her phone and tried to find the number in her call log. There it was, unknown, local. She could have called back, but something told her not to. The attendant would call again himself if it was really important. Or she would go to see him. Today. She just needed to come up with an excuse to leave the house alone. Before, that had been easy. James disappeared at work from morning till night, came home tired, sometimes irritable, often smelling of expensive whiskey. Marina didn't make scenes or ask questions, she was used to it. He provided for the family, gave her money, paid for the apartment and Paulina's activities. That was enough. Or she thought it was enough. Now that Paulina was gone, James suddenly decided to be around. He took time off, didn't leave the house, constantly asked how she was feeling. A caring husband. So why did that care make her want to scream? Marina stood up, threw a robe over her nightgown, and went out into the hallway. On the wall by the entrance to the nursery hung a photograph. Paulina at the beach, in a pink swimsuit, with a flamingo-shaped inflatable ring. It was last summer they'd gone to Miami together as a family. Paulina squealed with delight every time a wave covered her head, collected seashells, built sandcastles. James spent almost the entire time sitting under a canopy with his phone, brushing them off. Work, honey, work. But once they did take a photo together, the three of them, on the boardwalk at sunset. Marina had looked for that photo for a long time, wanting to frame it, but never found it. James said he'd accidentally deleted it while clearing space on his phone. Now Marina wondered if that photo had ever existed at all. Or if James simply didn't want it to exist. She walked past the nursery without daring to open the door. Everything inside was just as it had been, the bed with the pink bedspread, toys on the shelves, drawings on the walls. Paulina loved to draw mostly princesses, unicorns, and her family. In the last drawing she'd made a week before going into the hospital, there was a girl with yellow pigtails, a woman in a blue dress, and a small house with a red roof. There was no man in the picture. Marina had asked then, "Where's Dad?" Paulina shrugged. "Dad's at work. He's always at work." And she went back to her crayons, sticking out the tip of her tongue in concentration. The kitchen smelled of coffee and burnt toast. James was standing at the stove, stirring something in a pan. "I decided to make an omelet," he said without turning around. "You like it with tomatoes?" Marina sat down at the table and stared out the window. Third floor, a view of the courtyard. The playground, benches, an old maple tree they threatened to cut down every spring but never did. Paulina loved that maple tree, called it her tree, collected leaves from it, made bouquets for her mom. "Mom, look, I brought you summer." And she'd hold out a bunch of green leaves tied with string. Marina kept those bouquets until they dried up and crumbled to dust. Then Paulina brought new ones. "Marina?" James's voice pulled her back to reality. "Are you listening to me?" She blinked. "What?" "I'm asking if you want the omelet." "No. Just coffee." He put a cup in front of her and sat down across from her. His omelet was perfect, fluffy, golden, with pieces of tomato. James always cooked well when he wanted to. He just rarely wanted to. "I need to stop by the office today," he said between sips of coffee. "Just for a couple of hours. Things have piled up, Michael can't handle it alone." Marina nodded, feeling a strange sense of relief. So she would be able to leave. Should I call your mom? He asked. She could stay with you while I'm gone. No. I want to be alone. He frowned. Are you sure? The doctor said it's better not to be alone in this condition. James. She looked him in the eyes, and he fell silent. I need to be alone. Please. He hesitated, then nodded. Okay. Whatever you say. But if anything happens, call me right away. He left at 11. Marina waited another half hour, just in case he came back for something he'd forgotten. Then she got dressed quickly. Black jeans, a gray turtleneck, a dark coat. She pulled her hair into a ponytail and didn't put anything on her face. What difference did it make now? A stranger looked back at her from the mirror, a woman with sunken eyes and gray skin. Marina turned away and left the apartment. The morgue was located at St. Joseph's City Hospital, the same one where Paulina had spent the last 2 weeks of her life. Marina rode the bus, staring out the window and seeing nothing. Houses, shops, people drifted past, everyone living their normal lives, and it felt wrong. Unfair. How could the world keep spinning when her daughter was gone? She got off at the right stop and walked along the familiar path toward the gray hospital building. How many times had she walked this route over the past month? Every day. In the morning, to work in the adjacent building where the internal medicine department was. In the evening, to Paulina, in the pediatric ICU. Paulina had been sick for almost 2 years, a rare blood disorder that at first didn't seem so terrifying. It's treatable, the doctor had said back then, an elderly hematologist with kind eyes. Difficult, long, expensive but treatable. In Germany they do bone marrow transplants, we've started here too, but the waiting lists are long. Abroad is better, of course the success rate is higher. James had asked, how much? The doctor named the amount. Marina remembered how her head spun. It was an enormous sum, several $100,000. They couldn't afford that, even if they sold the apartment. But James just nodded. We'll find it. Give us some time. And they started saving. They sold the car, moved from a 3-bedroom apartment into this 2-bedroom one. Marina took extra shifts. James seemed to be hustling too, making deals, asking people for loans, promising to pay them back. Paulina held on. She was a brave girl, rarely cried from injections and IVs, became friends with the nurses, drew pictures for them. Mom, when are we going to Germany? She asked. They say there are castles there, like in fairy tales. I want to see a real castle. Soon, Marina promised. Very soon. We just need to collect the money. 3 months ago, James said the money wasn't enough. Something had fallen through with the project, he'd lost part of the amount, they'd have to start over. Marina cried all night. And a month later, Paulina got worse. Suddenly, rapidly, as if the illness had decided not to wait. She was taken to the ICU, hooked up to machines. Marina stayed by her bed, begged, promised anything, just for her daughter to hold on. Paulina smiled with pale lips and whispered, Mommy, don't cry. I'm strong. I'll make it. She didn't. Marina stopped at the entrance to the morgue. A squat building off to the side of the main complex. The door was shabby, with peeling blue paint. A sign with office hours and a phone number hung on the wall nearby. She pushed the door open and went inside. It smelled of bleach and something else Marina couldn't identify, but it immediately took her breath away. The small entry area was empty, a table with a logbook, 2 chairs, a coat rack. On the table sat an old rotary phone and a plastic flower in a pot. Footsteps sounded from behind a door deeper inside, and then he appeared, the same attendant. Marina recognized him immediately, short, stocky, with gray mustaches and deep wrinkles on his forehead. He was wearing a wrinkled white coat and blue rubber gloves, which he was pulling off as he walked. You came, he said without surprise. I'm Robert. Come in. He led her down the hallway, past closed doors with numbers, into a small office at the very end. It was cramped, a desk buried under papers, an ancient computer with a bulging monitor, a metal cabinet, and the corner of a refrigerator sticking out from the side. A calendar from 2 years ago hung on the wall, along with a faded photo of some sanatorium. Robert closed the door and gestured to a chair. Sit. He remained standing, leaning against the cabinet with his arms crossed. They were silent for a few seconds. Marina felt her heart pounding. You mentioned the recordings, she finally forced out. What's on them? What did you see? I've seen a lot. I'm used to thinking nothing can surprise me anymore. But this. He shook his head, then walked over to the computer and turned it on. The old machine hummed, the screen flickered, and slowly began to load. The night before last, he continued without taking his eyes off the monitor, I left at 10, like usual. We've had cameras here for years, but they're mostly useless. They record, but nobody watches. Hospital security doesn't come in here either. They don't like dealing with the dead any more than they have to. I sometimes check the footage, just out of boredom. Yesterday I decided to see what happened while I was gone. He opened a folder on the desktop and launched a video file. The screen lit up with a black and white image, the morgue corridor, the same one they had just walked through. The timestamp in the corner read 2:15 a.m. A man appeared on the recording. He walked quickly, confidently, as if he knew exactly where he was going. The camera caught him from behind, then he turned, and Marina felt the ground slip out from under her. James. It was James. The dark coat she herself had picked out as a birthday gift. His walk, the way he held his shoulders, the back of his head with the small mole just above the collar. He went up to one of the doors. Marina knew exactly which door it was. She herself had stood behind it just days earlier, staring at her daughter's pale face, and went inside. The camera in that room showed him bending over the small body under a white sheet, then straightening up and pulling something out of his pocket. He put it into the pocket of a lab coat hanging on a hook by the entrance, then quickly left. The whole thing took less than 3 minutes. What was that? Marina's voice sounded alien and hoarse. What did he put in the coat? Robert paused the video. I checked. That's my coat. I leave it here overnight. In the pocket, I found this. He opened a desk drawer and took out a clear plastic bag. Inside was a flash drive, ordinary, black, with no markings. I didn't look, he said. It's not my business. But I figured you needed to know. Marina reached out and took the bag. The flash drive felt almost weightless. Such a tiny thing, yet for some reason Marina was sure it held the answers to all the questions she was afraid to ask. Why did you show this to me? She asked. Why not my husband? Or the police? Robert looked at her for a long moment. Because I saw your girl. I saw you come to her every day. How you talked to her when she couldn't answer anymore. How you brushed her hair and changed the socks on her feet. And your husband? He paused. Your husband came once. For the identification. He stayed a minute. Didn't really look. Signed the papers and left. Marina closed her eyes. She remembered that day. James had said he couldn't be there, that it made him physically sick. She'd understood, hadn't insisted. Everyone grieves differently, after all. Thank you, she whispered, clutching the bag with the flash drive. Thank you, Robert. He waved it off. Go. And be careful. Marina didn't remember how she left the morgue. Or how she got to the bus stop. Or how she rode home. She came to only at the apartment door when she realized she couldn't find her keys. Her hands were shaking so badly that she spilled everything from her bag onto the stairwell floor. The neighbor from the second floor, Dorothy, poked her head out at the noise. Marina? What happened? Let me help. Marina silently shook her head, gathered her things, and somehow opened the door. Inside, it was quiet. James hadn't come back yet. Good. She needed time. She went into the bedroom, took out her laptop, and inserted the flash drive. Nothing happened for a few seconds, then a window with files opened. A lot of files. Photos, documents, spreadsheets. And one folder labeled Vera. Marina opened it. Inside were message threads, screenshots from a messaging app. James and some woman. Marina read on, and with every message the world around her collapsed like a house of cards. Sweetheart, when are we getting out of here already? Vera had written 3 months earlier. Soon. Not much left. We just need to wait until everything settles. And what about this? The girl? You promised you'd find the money for treatment. If she recovers, your wife won't leave you. She won't recover. I've arranged everything. I transferred the clinic money to your account. I told the doctor there wasn't enough for the surgery. He's stalling, prescribing supportive therapy. And then? Nature will do the rest. You're sure this will work? I'm sure. I consulted. Without a transplant, she has maybe 6 months. And with our clinic money, in a year we'll be in Europe. We'll start a new life. Marina read and couldn't breathe. The letters blurred before her eyes, but the meaning was clear. Crystal clear. James hadn't lost the money. He transferred it to his mistress. And Paulina? Paulina died because her own father decided she was an obstacle. An extra mouth. Something standing in the way of a new life. Marina flung the laptop so hard it flew off the bed onto the floor. Then she collapsed onto the pillow and screamed terribly, raggedly, like a wounded animal. She screamed until she lost her voice, then she cried, then she just lay there, staring at the ceiling. Her mind was empty. No thoughts, no feelings, only a black, cold void. When she could move again, it was already getting dark outside. She picked up the laptop. The screen was cracked, but it still worked. Marina went back to the messages and began reading from the very beginning. The story unfolded before her like a cheap detective novel, except this was her life. Her family. Her daughter. Vera turned out to be James's former classmate. They ran into each other by chance at some conference 2 years ago, right when Paulina's illness was discovered. At first they just texted, then they started seeing each other. Vera was young, ambitious, dreamed of a beautiful life. James, apparently, looked like a ticket to that life. You understand that with a sick child you'll never have a normal life, she wrote to him a year ago. Endless money, doctors, hospitals. And I want to travel. I want a house by the sea. I want children, healthy, normal children. Your children. And James agreed. He chose. Between his daughter and his mistress, he chose his mistress. There were more documents in the folder, bank statements. The money meant for Paulina's treatment had gone to an account belonging to some company registered in Vera's name. A lease agreement for an apartment in Montenegro. Plane tickets for 2, a month out. James and Vera were planning to leave. To abandon Marina here, with her daughter's grave and a shattered life. She closed the laptop and sat motionless for several minutes. Something inside her was changing, as if molten metal were cooling, turning into a cold, solid rod. The pain hadn't gone anywhere, but now something else had joined it. Rage. Icy, calm rage of someone who had nothing left to lose. James came back around 8. Marina heard him open the door, take off his shoes, walk into the kitchen. Marina, where are you? She didn't answer. He appeared in the bedroom doorway, and Marina looked at him carefully, as if seeing him for the first time. A handsome man, 32 years old. Dark hair, brown eyes, a dimple in his chin. Paulina had inherited that dimple. An expensive shirt, the watch he'd bought himself last New Year's. A caring husband. A good father. A killer. Are you okay? He asked, coming closer. You look strange. I'm fine. Just tired. Go lie down, I'll stay up a bit. He nodded, but kept looking at her with mild confusion. Then he shrugged and went into the bathroom. Marina waited until he closed the door, then took out her phone and dialed a number. Dorothy answered on the 3rd ring. Marina, did something happen? Dorothy, I need your help. Can I come by tomorrow? Around 10, after James leaves. A pause. Then, of course, dear. Come. I'll be waiting. Marina had known Dorothy her whole life. She'd lived in the neighboring apartment for as long as anyone could remember. When Marina was little, she ran to her place for candy and listened to stories about her late husband, a pilot. When Marina grew up and married James, Dorothy baked their wedding cake. When Paulina was born, she brought the first booties she'd knitted herself, tiny, pink, with satin ribbons. And when Paulina got sick, Dorothy came almost every day, bringing homemade broth and pies, sitting with Marina when she needed to cry. If anyone could be trusted, it was her. The night passed in a haze. Marina lay next to James, listening to his even breathing, thinking, this is the man who killed my daughter. Not with his hands worse. He killed her with inaction. Condemned her to death for money, for another woman. And he slept peacefully. Peacefully, because he was sure no one would ever know. She didn't close her eyes until dawn. Toward morning she got up, drank coffee, watching the sky outside slowly lighten. Paulina loved sunrises. Mom, look, the sun is waking up, she used to shout, climbing into Marina's bed and pointing at the window. Now the sun would wake up without her. James left at 9 office business again. Marina walked him to the door, kissed him on the cheek, wished him a good day. He looked at her in surprise. You're sure you're okay? You seem different. A little better, she replied. I guess that happens. You come back to yourself little by little. He nodded, apparently satisfied with the explanation, and left. Marina waited until the elevator carried him down, then threw on a sweater and went up to the second floor. Dorothy opened the door immediately, as if she'd been waiting behind it. Come in, dear. I put the kettle on. Her apartment felt like it belonged to another era, rugs on the walls, a crystal chandelier, a sideboard with porcelain elephants. It smelled like something delicious apple pie, maybe. Sit, the old woman fussed. I baked it yesterday. You like it with cinnamon, right? Marina sat at the round table covered with an embroidered tablecloth. Dorothy poured tea into porcelain cups, put a slice of pie on a plate. Then she sat across from her and looked Marina straight in the eyes. Tell me. And Marina told her everything. From the morgue attendant's call to the camera footage, the flash drive with the messages. About the money that was supposed to save Paulina. About Vera, about Montenegro, about the plane tickets. She spoke dryly, without tears. The tears had run out during the night. Dorothy listened in silence, growing paler with every word. When Marina finished, the old woman sat motionless for a long time, then said quietly, Dear God. God, Marina. I always knew he was a bad man. But this? What do I do? Marina asked. Her voice was calm, almost businesslike. Go to the police? Hold off on the police, Dorothy said thoughtfully, turning her cup in her hands. First, everything needs to be organized properly. You have evidence, that's good. But you need to secure it so he can't get to it. Make copies. Lots of copies. Email them, give them to someone you trust. And then. She paused. My nephew is a detective with the San Francisco Police Department. A good boy, decent. I can ask him to look at this unofficially. See if there's a crime here. Marina nodded. Something new was waking up inside her, cold, calculating resolve. She was no longer a confused, grief-stricken mother. She was a woman preparing for revenge. And one more thing, Dorothy added. You need to talk to your mom. Barbara has to know. Barbara lived on the other side of the city, in a small apartment in Richmond. After Marina's father died 10 years ago, she never really recovered. She lived quietly, almost like a recluse, calling her daughter occasionally and visiting even less often. She adored Paulina but didn't see her much. James didn't like it when his mother-in-law lingered in the house. She makes me nervous, he used to say. Just sits there and watches. Like she's judging. At the funeral, Barbara held herself together by sheer force of will, small, hunched, in a black scarf. She stood through the entire ceremony with her eyes closed, silently moving her lips, and Marina understood that her mother was praying. Praying the way only grandmothers do, desperately, fervently, with their whole soul. Marina called her that same day. Mom, I need to come over. Today. It's important. Barbara didn't ask questions. Come, my girl. Marina made several copies of the contents of the flash drive. She emailed one to herself, burned the second onto a disk and left it with Dorothy, and hid the third in the nursery, inside an old plush teddy bear Paulina used to call Mishka. She put the original flash drive in her pocket and went to her mother's place. Barbara opened the door and immediately wrapped her daughter in a tight, silent, lingering hug. Marina allowed herself a second of weakness, pressed her face into her mother's shoulder, and breathed in the familiar scent lavender, laundry soap, something warm and homelike. Then she pulled back. "Mom, we need to talk." They sat in the small kitchen, surrounded by potted geraniums and old floral curtains. Marina told the whole story again, once more without tears. Barbara listened, her face growing harder by the minute. When Marina finished, her mother was silent for a long time. Then she spoke, her voice hard as steel. "He won't get away with this. I promise you, my girl. He won't." "I'm scared," Marina admitted. "Scared he'll find out. That he'll do something. That I won't be able to handle it." "You will," Barbara said, taking Marina's hand in her dry, warm palms. "You're my daughter. My blood runs in you, the blood of your grandfather who went through the war and never broke. You'll manage. And I'll be right here." That evening Marina returned home. James was already there, sitting on the couch watching a soccer game. When he saw her, he hit pause. "Where were you?" "At my mom's," she replied. "I wanted to check on her. She's not doing well after everything." He nodded without much interest. "Got it. Is there dinner?" "I didn't cook." "You can order something." He grimaced but didn't argue and pulled out his phone. The next few days passed in a strange tension. Marina played the role of the devoted wife, the grieving mother, the lost woman trying to pull herself together. James seemed to notice nothing. He kept going to work, coming home late, sometimes smelling of someone else's perfume. Before, Marina would have looked the other way. Now she noted every detail. She didn't know for sure whether he was seeing Vera or not, but it no longer mattered. Nothing mattered except one thing: he had to pay. Dorothy's nephew, David 35, thin, with attentive eyes behind glasses, called a week later. "Marina, my aunt told me your story. I reviewed the documents you gave her. Can we meet?" They met at a cafe near the hospital, a quiet place with hardly any daytime customers. David ordered coffee, Marina ordered tea and didn't touch it. "The situation is complicated," he said once the waitress walked away. "Formally, there's no clear criminal offense. Your husband didn't officially refuse treatment or sign any papers stopping therapy. He simply didn't transfer the money. And that alone isn't a criminal act." Marina felt something inside her snap. "So he gets away with it? He killed my daughter, and nothing happens?" "Wait," David raised his hand. "I said we can't open a homicide case on that alone. But there's more. First, fraud. If we prove he transferred family funds to a third party through deception, that's a charge. Second, a civil lawsuit. You can seek damages for emotional distress and a division of assets considering his bad faith. And third." He paused, choosing his words. "There's something else. That woman, Vera. I looked into her. She's registered as a sole proprietor, runs some kind of online shop that barely functions. But over the last 2 years, more than $500,000 passed through her accounts. And there's reason to believe this isn't an isolated case. She's appeared in several fraud investigations before, though none made it to court. The victims withdrew their complaints." Marina nodded slowly. The picture was becoming clearer. "She hunts men," she said. It wasn't a question. "Looks like it," David agreed. "She finds men with money and family problems, offers comfort, then drains them dry." "My husband is an idiot," Marina said, bitter irony in her voice. "He thought it was love. She was just using him. Maybe. But that doesn't absolve him. He made a choice. A conscious, adult choice." Marina looked out the window at people going about their lives, unaware of anything. "What should I do?" she asked at last. "Wait," David replied. "I'll pass this information to colleagues who handle financial crimes. If we're lucky, we can open a case against Vera, and your husband will come in as a witness or an accomplice. For now, behave as usual. Don't show that you know anything. And most importantly, keep all the evidence safe." Marina went home feeling like she was playing a game whose rules changed every minute. James was in a good mood. He'd cooked dinner, opened a bottle of wine, even put on some romantic music. I thought we need a distraction, he said. Maybe we should go somewhere. The ocean, the mountains. Change the scenery. Marina almost laughed. The ocean. The mountains. In a month he was planning to fly to Montenegro with another woman, and now he was offering his wife a romantic getaway. The hypocrisy was staggering. Maybe, she said. I'll think about it. He smiled that same smile that once made her heart race and now made her want to spit in his face. Great. I'm glad you're coming back to yourself. The days dragged on slowly. Marina went back to work. Her family leave was over. Her co-workers looked at her with sympathy, spoke in hushed tones, kept their distance. That was fine. Marina didn't want to talk. She did her job, hung IVs, took blood pressure, filled out charts, smiled at patients. Automatic movements, empty words. Inside there was only cold emptiness and waiting. 2 weeks later, David called. Marina, we have news. Can you come down to the precinct? In a cramped office that smelled of paper and cheap coffee, David introduced her to 2 colleagues, a middle-aged man with a mustache and a young woman in a sharp suit. This is Detective Thomas and Detective Emily from the Financial Crimes Unit, he said. They're working on the case involving your acquaintance. Thomas cleared his throat. Marina, your information turned out to be extremely helpful. We ran a check and found that over the past 5 years, Vera has defrauded at least 4 men. The pattern is the same every time: meeting, romance, promises of a shared future, then money for business projects that never work. The total amount is around $1.5 million. We've contacted 3 of the victims, 2 are willing to testify. But your case is different. He paused, looking at Marina with a strange expression. Your husband didn't just give money to a fake business. He transferred funds intended for your daughter's treatment. And there are messages indicating he knew the consequences. That's no longer just fraud. That's complicity in causing death through negligence. At the very least. Marina felt her hands tremble. What does that mean? It means, Emily stepped in, that we can open a criminal case not only against Vera, but against your husband as well. But we need additional evidence. Testimony from the doctors who treated your daughter. Medical records confirming that surgery could have saved her life. And ideally, your testimony. Marina nodded. She was ready. That evening, after James fell asleep, she took the documents from their hiding place. Medical reports she had kept from the very first day of Paulina's illness. Certificates from the clinic in Germany, she had translated them herself at night while her daughter slept. Everything was in perfect order, numbered, dated, signed. She never imagined they would be needed for this. There was one more photo in the folder. Paulina on a swing in the courtyard, about 4 years old. A sunny day, golden pigtails flying, her mouth open in a joyful shout. Marina traced a finger over the smooth surface of the picture. I'll do this for you, sweetheart, she whispered. I promise. The following months felt like a waking dream. Marina gave statements, went to interrogations, met with a lawyer Emily recommended. She spoke with doctors from the hospital where Paulina had been treated. It turned out the hematologist with kind eyes had always suspected something was wrong. Your husband asked strange questions, he said. About how quickly the disease progresses without treatment. At first I thought he was just trying to understand the situation. Then I thought he was preparing for the worst. Now I see he was planning. James suspected nothing until one morning when people in uniform rang the doorbell. Marina stood in the hallway and watched as her husband, her soon-to-be ex-husband, she had filed for divorce a week earlier, turned pale, gasped for air, tried to speak. James Lavrov, you are being detained on suspicion of fraud and involvement in causing death through negligence. You have the right to remain silent. He turned to her, and in his eyes was something she had never seen before. Fear. Real, animal fear. Marina, he rasped. Was it you? Did you do this? She didn't answer. She just watched as they led him away. The trial was long and exhausting. Vera Marina saw her for the first time turned out to be a plain-looking woman in her mid-30s with dyed hair and a predatory gaze. In court, she tried to play the victim, claimed James had used her, that she hadn't known about the sick child. But the messages spoke for themselves. You promised you'd find the money for treatment. If she recovers, your wife won't leave you. Those words were read aloud in the courtroom, and Vera went so pale it looked like she might faint. James received 5 years of probation for fraud and an additional 2 years in prison for his involvement in his daughter's death. The prosecutors sought a harsher sentence, but the judge cited the lack of direct intent. He did not kill the child with his own hands, the judge said while reading the verdict. But his inaction, his conscious choice, led to a tragic outcome. And the court cannot leave that unpunished. Vera was sentenced to 4 years in prison for large-scale fraud. She screamed that it was unfair, that she was innocent, that everyone was against her. The guards led her out of the courtroom amid her screams, and for the first time in many months Marina felt something like peace. After the trial, Barbara invited her daughter over. They sat in the kitchen, drank tea with raspberry jam, while a fine autumn rain fell outside. "How are you, my girl?" her mother asked. Marina paused, searching for words. "I don't know. I feel like I fulfilled my duty. To Paulina. She deserved justice, and I gave it to her. But," Barbara gently prompted, "but it didn't get easier. She's still gone. And nothing will bring her back." Barbara took her daughter's hand and squeezed it. "It won't get easier, Marina. Never. But you'll be able to go on. For her. For her memory. For that little brave girl who loved to draw princesses." Marina looked at her mother and, for the first time in many months, truly cried. Not from pain. Not from anger. From something else she couldn't name. She and James sold the apartment. By court order it went to Marina along with compensation for damages. The money was enough for a small studio in a new building, with some left over. Marina didn't want to live where everything reminded her of the past. Of Paulina, yes. Of James, no. 6 months after the trial, she ran into Robert. By chance, on the street near that same morgue. He recognized her immediately. "Hello, Marina. How are you?" She smiled, sincerely, for the first time in a long while. "I'm living." "Because of me," he shook his head. "Not because of you. You just showed me the road. I walked it myself." "Why did you do it?" she asked the question that had haunted her all this time. "I had a daughter," he said quietly. "A long time ago, during the recession in the early 90s. She's gone too. And I know what it's like when no one tells you the truth. When everyone pretends nothing happened. I didn't want you to go through that." Marina reached out and squeezed his hand. "Thank you, Robert. Thank you." A year passed. Marina was still working at the same hospital, but now as a head nurse. Her colleagues said she had changed. She was calmer, more confident. Sometimes, when no one was looking, she smiled at something private. On the desk in her office stood a photograph, a little girl on a swing, golden pigtails, a joyful shout frozen in time. Beside it sat a plush teddy bear named Mishka. Every morning when she came to work, Marina said to them, "Good morning, sweetheart. Today is a good day." Dorothy still lived on the floor below. Now they saw each other every week. Marina came over for tea and apple pie, talked about work, about the news. Sometimes they just sat in silence, and that was good too. David, Dorothy's nephew, stopped by occasionally to check in. Marina noticed the way he looked at her, but she wasn't ready for anything new yet. Maybe later. Someday. Barbara moved closer, rented an apartment in the neighboring building. "I want to be near my daughter," she said. Now they saw each other almost every day, and it was exactly what they both needed. In the spring, on the first anniversary of Paulina's death, Marina went to the cemetery. The grave was well cared for. She tended to it carefully, brought flowers, planted pansies that Paulina loved for their funny little faces. On the headstone was a photo, a smiling girl, 2 baby teeth missing. Marina sat down on the edge of the fence and was silent for a long time. Then she said, "Hi, sweetheart. It's Mom. I'm doing okay. I miss you every day. But you know what? I've learned how to live. Not instead of you with you. You're always with me, in my heart. And you always will be. On the way back, she stopped at a store and bought a pink unicorn backpack, exactly like the one that had once sat on a shelf in the old apartment. That evening she took it to a children's home near her workplace. A tired woman with kind eyes accepted the gift gratefully. We actually have a girl who's starting first grade this fall. She'll be so happy. Marina stepped outside and looked up at the sky. The sun was breaking through the clouds, and for a second she thought she heard a child's laughter, clear, joyful, painfully familiar. The sun is waking up, she whispered. And for the first time in a very long while, she felt that she was waking up too. Life went on. Not in spite of everything that had happened, but because of it. Because of a little brave girl who believed in magic and loved drawing princesses. Because of a morgue attendant with tired eyes who wasn't afraid to tell the truth. Because of a mother who was always there. Because of a neighbor with apple pies and embroidered tablecloths. Because of all the people who didn't look away when it mattered. Marina walked down the street, the spring wind teasing her hair. She thought about how an entire life lay ahead. And about how Paulina would want her mom to be happy. I'll try, sweetheart, she said out loud. I promise I'll try. And she did. Every day, step by step, she built a new life. Not the one she had before that life had ended the moment a little heart stopped beating. But another one. A life where pain turned into strength. A life where the memory of her daughter became not a burden, but a light. A life where justice, even delayed, even imperfect, gave her the chance to breathe. 2 years later, Marina married David. The wedding was quiet, just close family. Her mother, Dorothy, a few close friends. Marina wore a simple white dress with a sprig of lily of the valley in her hair. Paulina loved Lily of the Valley. A year after that, they had a daughter. They named her Paulina. When Marina held her for the first time, tiny, warm, with soft hair and serious eyes, she felt something inside her, long clenched into a tight knot, finally loosen. It wasn't a replacement. It wasn't an attempt to forget. It was a continuation. A continuation of love that had never gone anywhere, that had simply found a new form. Little Paulina grew up, and sometimes Marina thought she recognized in her features of the first Paulina. The same way she wrinkled her nose when she didn't like something. The same habit of sticking out her tongue when concentrating. The same love of drawing. But this was a different child, with her own character, her own quirks, her own destiny. When little Paulina turned 3, Marina took her to the cemetery for the first time. They laid flowers on the grave, and Marina said, "This is your sister." Her name was Paulina too. She was very brave and very kind. And she would have loved you very much. The little girl looked at the photo on the headstone, the smiling girl with 2 missing baby teeth, and asked, "Why is she in the sky?" "Because she became an angel," Marina answered. "She watches us from above and is happy when we're happy." Little Paulina nodded with the seriousness of a 3-year-old. "Then I'll be happy. So she'll be happy too." Marina hugged her daughter and felt tears well up in her eyes. But these were different tears. Bright ones. Grateful ones. That evening, after putting her daughter to bed, Marina stepped out onto the balcony. The city below shimmered with lights, and the sky above was scattered with stars. She looked at them and thought about the long road she had traveled from the night she learned the truth to this moment. A road through pain, rage, despair, courtrooms, loneliness, new love, a new life. And she knew none of it had been in vain. Because somewhere out there among the stars, a little girl with golden pigtails was looking at her and smiling. And saying, "Mommy, don't cry. I'm always here." Marina smiled back and whispered, "I know, sweetheart. I know." David stepped onto the balcony and wrapped his arms around his wife from behind. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "The stars," Marina replied. "And how much light there is in the dark." He kissed the top of her head and said nothing. Words weren't needed. They stood there, holding each other, looking at the stars. Somewhere deep in the apartment, their daughter breathed softly in her sleep, and Charlie the cat, Ginger, fat, picked up a year earlier near the building entrance, purred on the couch. It was an ordinary evening of an ordinary family. And in that ordinariness there was something indescribably beautiful. Marina closed her eyes and allowed herself to simply be. To be here. To be now. To be happy not despite the past, but together with it. The story wasn't over, it was continuing. Every day, every hour, every minute. And Marina knew that whatever came next, she would handle it. Because she had already survived the worst. And because those who loved her were near. And that was enough. Dorothy passed away 5 years later, quietly, in her sleep, just as she had wanted. At the funeral, Marina cried, but without that black despair she once knew. It was a gentle sadness, a farewell to someone dear. At the reception, David said, she was like a grandmother to all of us. A real one. Marina nodded. David inherited Dorothy's apartment as her only relative. They didn't sell it, they rented it to a family with 2 children, and now in the evenings children's laughter drifted through the walls. Barbara lived to 83. Her last years she spent in her daughter's apartment. Marina took her in when it became clear she couldn't manage alone. Little Paulina adored her grandmother, read to her, brought her tea. "Grandma, tell me about Mom when she was little." And Barbara told stories Marina herself had long forgotten, about how at 5 she decided to run away and join the circus, about her first bad grade and her first crush, about prom night and a white dress. When Barbara passed away, Marina felt as if an entire era had left with her. But along with the sadness came gratitude for everything her mother had given her. For the strength she passed on. For her faith in justice. James was released from prison after 1.5 years on parole for good behavior. Marina learned about it by chance, from mutual acquaintances. She felt nothing, no anger, no satisfaction. Just emptiness. Later she heard he had gone somewhere in Alaska, found work on an oil rig. People said he drank. People said he had aged 20 years. She didn't check. It was no longer her story. Vera was released early as well. 1 year later she was caught again for fraud, this time involving real estate. She received 7 years. Marina saw it in the news and just shook her head. Some people never change. Little Paulina grew up, went to school, then to college. She became a doctor, a pediatric hematologist. "I want to help kids like my sister," she said once. Marina hugged her and didn't let go for a long time. Robert lived to be 92. Every year, on the anniversary of the first Paulina's death, Marina brought him flowers and a homemade pie. He met her at the door of his tiny apartment, treated her to tea from an old samovar, real, copper, inherited from his great-grandmother, and they talked. About everything and nothing. About life, about death, about what lay between. "You're a good person, Marina," he said once. "I'm glad I met you." "And I'm glad you called me that day," she replied. If it weren't for you, if it weren't for me, you would have found out anyway," he interrupted gently. "The truth always comes out. I just sped things up a little." At his quiet, almost unnoticed funeral, Marina placed a branch of rowan on the coffin. He loved rowan berries, said they reminded him of childhood, of the farm, of times when everything was simpler. The years went by. Marina rose from head nurse to department director, then to deputy chief medical officer. She still went to see patients, talked with them, held the hands of those who were afraid. "You have a special gift," her colleagues said. "You know how to calm people." She didn't argue. She knew where the gift came from the pain she had lived through, from understanding that sometimes the most important thing is simply to be there. David retired before she did. His health began to fail after so many years in the police. Now he stayed home, took care of the grandchildren. Yes, they had grandchildren now, 2 of them, from Paulina, and cooked dinners for his wife's return. He learned how to bake pies, almost as good as Dorothy's. One evening, an ordinary one, Marina sat on the balcony with an old photo album. A cup of tea in her hands, a sunset in the sky, children's voices playing somewhere below. She turned the pages and looked at the faces. Her mother, young and beautiful. Her father, whom she barely remembered. Herself in a school uniform. James. She didn't tear those photos out, they were part of the story, even the dark part. And Paulina. So many photos of Paulina. First steps. First birthday. On the swing. At the beach. With Mishka. The last photo from the hospital, a week before the end, pale, thin, but still smiling. "Mommy, don't cry." Marina wasn't crying. She was smiling. "Grandma, what are you looking at?" Ben, the older grandson, 5 years old, red-haired like Charlie the cat who was long gone, ran out onto the balcony. "Pictures," Marina said. "Want to see?" He climbed onto her lap and pointed at a photo. "Who's that?" "That's your aunt. Also Paulina. Like your mom." "Why are there two Paulinas?" Marina paused, choosing her words. Then she said, "Because love doesn't get divided. It multiplies. And when you love someone very, very much, even if they're not nearby, that love finds a new home." Ben wrinkled his nose, just like the first Paulina once had. "I don't get it. But it sounds nice." Marina laughed. "You'll understand later. When you grow up." She hugged her grandson and looked at the sunset. The sun was sinking behind the rooftops, and the sky was pink, golden, fiery, just the way a little girl with golden pigtails used to love drawing it. "The sun is going to sleep," Ben said. "Yes," Marina agreed. "But tomorrow it will wake up again." She knew it for certain. The sun would rise and set, days would replace nights, children would be born and grow up, and life, this strange, unpredictable, sometimes cruel, yet still beautiful life, would go on. And somewhere out there, among the stars, a little girl was waiting for her, who one day would say, "Mommy, I'm so happy to see you. Tell me everything, everything, everything." And Marina would tell her. She would tell her how she lived after her. How she fought and won. How she loved and lost and loved again. About the grandchildren Paulina would never see but who knew her name. About apple pies and tea from a samovar. About sunsets and sunrises. About how much light there can be in the dark. But that would be later. For now, there was the sunset, a grandson on her lap, a cup of tea, a photo album. For now, there was life. And Marina would live it with dignity. Until the very end. As she had promised. Early in the morning, before the city had woken up, Marina stepped out onto the balcony. She was 72 years old, and she still got up early, a habit left over from the years she worked at the hospital. Now she simply watched the sunrise and drank coffee, real coffee, brewed in a small pot, the way her mother had once taught her. The city below was quiet and empty. Only a few cars passed along the street, pigeons cooed on the ledge. Marina loved this time, when the world wasn't fully awake yet, when you could be alone with yourself and your thoughts. She thought about how strangely life is arranged. How light can be born from the deepest darkness. How pain turns into strength and loss into wisdom. How the people we lose never truly leave. They live on in us, in our decisions, in our children, in our memory. The first rays of the sun touched the rooftops of neighboring buildings, and the sky turned a soft pink. Marina smiled. "Good morning, sweetheart," she whispered. "The sun is waking up." Somewhere inside the apartment, David stirred, pots clattered in the kitchen. Any moment now he would come out, hug her, grumble about getting up so early and the cold wind on the balcony. Then they would have breakfast together, like they had every morning for the past 30 years. And later their daughter would come with the grandchildren, and the house would fill with laughter and noise, and the cat, now a different one, Black, named Smokey, would hide under the couch from little hands. An ordinary day. An ordinary life. Ordinary happiness. Marina finished her coffee and turned toward the door. Another day lay ahead. Another chance to live, to love, to remember. And she had no intention of letting it slip by. But let's go back to those days when it was all just beginning. To the days when Marina still didn't know what awaited her, when the world hadn't yet collapsed, and then hadn't yet been rebuilt. After Marina returned from Robert's place with the flash drive in her pocket, she sat on the bus for a long time, missing her stop. She rode somewhere toward the edge of the city, staring out the window and seeing nothing. Houses, trees, people floated by, all of it seeming unreal, like scenery from someone else's life. She got off at the final stop, stood for a while at the empty bus shelter, then boarded the next bus and rode back. The driver, an elderly man with gray mustaches, looked at her with concern. "Ma'am, are you okay? You look pale." Marina nodded, unable to speak. He shook his head and turned back to the road. At home, the first thing she did was check whether James was there. His shoes stood in the entryway, From the kitchen came the sound of the TV, some talk show, women's voices arguing about something trivial. Marina went into the bedroom, closed the door, and sat down on the bed. The flash drive in her pocket felt red-hot, burning into her thigh through the denim. She took it out and stared at it for a long time. A small black rectangle containing the truth. A terrible, ugly truth about the man she had lived with for 8 years. About the man she had once loved. They had met at the wedding of mutual friends. Marina was 23 then, just out of nursing school, newly working at a clinic. James seemed handsome, confident, mature. He was 26. He worked at some company, wore expensive watches, and spoke intelligently about business and investments. Marina, who had grown up in a simple family where her mother worked as an accountant and her father as a bus driver, was dazzled by that shine. He courted her beautifully: flowers, restaurants, trips out of town in his brand new car. 6 months later, he proposed on the roof of a trendy bar overlooking the night city, with a bottle of champagne. Marina said yes without hesitation. The wedding was lavish. James insisted. "I have a lot of business partners. We need to make an impression." Marina wanted something modest, just for family, but she gave in. She gave in often back then. It seemed like he knew better how things should be. He was so smart, so successful. Her mother looked at her future son-in-law with distrust but stayed silent. Only once, a week before the wedding, did she say, "Are you sure, sweetheart? He's kind of cold." Marina brushed it off. "Mom, you just don't know him. He's good." Really? The first years weren't bad. James worked a lot, came home late, but on weekends they went out to the movies, the park, to see friends. Marina learned to cook his favorite dishes, set up the apartment, got a cat, Ginger, Fluffy. She named him Peach. James tolerated the cat but didn't like him, said there was fur everywhere. 2 years later, Peach ran outside and never came back. Marina cried for a week. James said, "Good riddance." One less problem. Paulina was born 3 years after the wedding. Marina had wanted a child for a long time, but James kept postponing it. Not the right time. "We need to get on our feet first, earn money for a bigger place." When she finally got pregnant, he accepted the news calmly, without much joy. "Well, then it's time." Marina went through the entire pregnancy alone. James was too busy at work to go with her to ultrasounds or parenting classes. She gave birth alone as well. He came to the hospital only the next day with a bouquet of white roses and a plush teddy bear. "She's pretty," he said, looking at his daughter. And that was all. No tears, no tremor in his voice, none of the wonder Marina saw in other fathers. Just a statement of fact. Marina convinced herself that everything was fine. Men express feelings differently. He was just reserved. He loved them in his own way, a man's way. She believed that for a long time. A very long time. Even when James started being home less and less. Even when he stopped asking how her day went. Even when he grew irritated by Paulina's crying, "Calm her down, my head is splitting." Marina handled everything herself, feeding, rocking, walking, taking Paulina to doctors. James earned money. That was their division of responsibilities. When Paulina turned 4, they discovered the illness. It started with bruises that appeared on their own, without reason, on her arms and legs. Then fatigue, paleness, frequent colds. The pediatrician said, "Go to a hematologist." Immediately. Marina remembered that day down to the smallest detail, sitting in the doctor's office, looking at scans and numbers she didn't understand, listening to words she didn't want to hear. A rare blood disorder. Treatable, but difficult. A bone marrow transplant was needed. James reacted strangely. He didn't shout, didn't cry, didn't ask questions. He just sat there in silence, staring at one point. Then he said, "How much does it cost?" The doctor named the amount. James nodded. "We'll find it." And he left the office. Marina was left alone with a pile of papers and referrals, with a confused nurse offering her water. She didn't cry then. The tears came later, at night, when Paulina fell asleep and she no longer had to pretend to be strong. The next 2 years turned into an endless race: hospitals, procedures, medications, tests. Marina took a leave, then another, then went part-time. James kept working, even more than before. Money doesn't earn itself, he said. Marina didn't argue. She was too exhausted to argue. Paulina held on. She was an extraordinary child, bright, joyful, despite everything. Everyone at the hospital loved her. Nurses brought her candy and books, doctors lingered in her room to listen to her stories about unicorns and princesses. "You have an amazing daughter," they told Marina. "So brave." Marina nodded and smiled, while inside everything tightened with fear. Brave. Yes. Braver than all of them put together. They collected money for the surgery little by little. Marina sold everything she could, jewelry James had given her for anniversaries, her grandmother's old brooch, even her wedding dress it had been hanging in the closet and used anyway. James said he was working on it too, that he had a plan, that everything would be fine soon. Marina believed him. She wanted to believe him. And then that conversation, 3 months earlier. James came home later than usual, his face gray, the smell of whiskey on him. "Marina, we need to talk." He sat at the kitchen table and rubbed his temples. "The money. We have a problem. I invested part of it in a project. They promised a good return. But something went wrong. Long story short, we lost almost half." Marina stared at him, unable to believe it. "Half? James, that's Paulina's money. For the surgery. How could you?" He snapped back. "What was I supposed to do? Sit and wait? We needed more, much more. I was trying." "You were trying?" Marina felt something tear inside her. "You were trying to play businessman while our daughter is dying?" They yelled at each other for half the night. Then they fell silent. Then James went to sleep in the living room, and Marina sat in the kitchen until dawn, staring into emptiness. She didn't know then that the money wasn't gone because it had been lost. She didn't know about Vera, about Montenegro, about the plane tickets. She just thought her husband was an idiot. An irresponsible, selfish idiot. A month later, Paulina got worse. Suddenly, rapidly, as if the illness had sensed that the time had come. She was placed in intensive care, hooked up to machines. Marina stayed by her daughter's bed day and night, talked to her, sang songs, read fairy tales. Paulina listened, sometimes smiled, sometimes fell asleep. "Mommy, are we going to Germany?" she asked once, barely moving her lips. "They have castles there, like in fairy tales." "We're going," Marina whispered, squeezing her little hand. "We're definitely going." Paulina died a week later. Quietly, in her sleep, early in the morning. Marina held her hand until the very last moment. She felt her daughter stop breathing, felt her body relax, felt something intangible a soul leave that fragile shell. And then she screamed. She screamed so loudly that doctors and nurses came running. She screamed until her voice gave out, until there was no strength left even for tears. James arrived an hour later. He stood in the doorway of the room, looked at the small body under the white sheet, and said nothing. Marina lifted her eyes to him, red, swollen, empty, and said, "She's gone." He nodded. Just nodded. And left. He organized the funeral. Marina wasn't capable of it. She moved like an automaton, got up, washed, put on a black dress, went somewhere, stood, sat, listened to someone's words. She felt nothing. Inside was a scorched desert where nothing living grew. And then the call. With the flash drive in her hand, Marina understood this was the turning point. The point of no return. She could have not gone to the morgue attendant. She could have thrown the flash drive away without opening it. She could have gone on living in ignorance, mourning her daughter and slowly fading next to the man who had betrayed her. But she chose the truth. No matter how terrifying it was. Marina stood up, took an old laptop from the closet, and inserted the flash drive. Her fingers trembled as she opened folder after folder. Photos of James and Vera, in a restaurant, on some waterfront, in a car. They were smiling, hugging, looking happy. In the background of some pictures, Marina recognized places. That cafe in downtown San Francisco where she and James had gone in the early years of their marriage. The park where they walked with Paulina when she was still healthy. He had taken his mistress to their places. Places that meant something to her, to Marina. That hurt especially deeply, as if he hadn't just cheated, but deliberately spat on everything they had shared. The messages stretched over 2 years. Marina read them methodically, like a patient's medical chart, facts, dates, symptoms. How they met, at some conference James attended for work. How the affair began, first innocent messages, then increasingly explicit. How Vera manipulated him, played on his ego, gradually planted the idea that family was a burden, that a sick child was a sentence, that real life was waiting somewhere out there, beyond the horizon. "You deserve more," she wrote a year earlier. "You're so talented, so smart. And what do you get in return? A wife who thinks only about her daughter. A daughter who will never recover. That's not life, James. That's a prison." And he agreed. He agreed, complained, poured his heart out. "You're right. I'm so tired. Sometimes I think I won't make it. That it would be easier if what?" Vera asked. "Nothing. Forget it." But he didn't forget. He began to plan. Marina found documents confirming it, bank statements, contracts, drafts of agreements. The money for the surgery, the very money she had collected penny by penny, had gone to accounts belonging to Vera's company. For business development, as it was officially called. In reality, for the beautiful life they planned to start together. There was one more folder, the one Marina opened last. It was titled Plan. Inside were several text files dated on different days. The first had been created 1.5 years earlier. Steps: 1. Gradually transfer money to V, completed. 2. Convince M that the money for the surgery was lost. In progress. 3. Wait for the natural course of events. 4. Afterward divorce, division of assets, departure. Marina read those lines, and the letters blurred before her eyes. Wait for the natural course of events. That's what he called it. The death of his own daughter - the natural course of events. She slammed the laptop shut so hard the lid cracked. Then she stood up and went to the bathroom, nausea rising in her throat. She stood over the sink, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Pale, dark circles under her eyes, a dull, extinguished look. A woman whose daughter had just died. A woman betrayed by her husband. A woman who had lost everything. But deep in her eyes, something flickered. A spark. Tiny, barely noticeable, but alive. "No," Marina said out loud. "I won't let you get away with this. I won't." She splashed cold water on her face, dried it, and went back to the bedroom. She took a notebook from the nightstand, the one she'd kept since nursing school, and started writing. Everything she knew. Everything she'd seen. Everything that had to be done. First, secure the evidence. She copied the contents of the flash drive to her email, to cloud storage, to a disk she hid inside a book on the shelf. She put the original in her pocket, just in case. Second, find allies. Dorothy, reliable, proven, had known her since childhood. Her mom, of course. Who else? Marina ran through friends and acquaintances in her mind. Natasha, no, too talkative, she'd spread it all over town. Iris from work maybe, but they weren't close enough. David, Dorothy's nephew, that was serious. A detective. Someone who knew the law and could help. Third, don't give herself away too soon. James mustn't suspect anything. She would play the role of the grief-stricken widow. That wouldn't be hard, she was a grief-stricken mother. The only difference was that now grief was joined by rage. Cold, calculated rage. Marina closed the notebook and hid it under the mattress. Then she left the bedroom and went into the kitchen, where James was watching TV and eating a sandwich. "How are you?" he asked without taking his eyes off the screen. "Fine," she replied. "I'm going to lie down." She went back to the bedroom, lay down, and closed her eyes. Her heart was pounding, adrenaline buzzing through her blood. But on the outside she was calm. Like a lake before a storm. The next morning Marina woke up before James. She made breakfast: eggs, toast, coffee. Set the table and waited for him to come out of the bedroom. "Wow," he raised his eyebrows. "You cooked?" I figured we both need strength, she smiled, and the smile came surprisingly easily. Sit. Eat. They ate in silence. James glanced at her curiously but didn't ask anything. He probably thought she was coming back to herself. That the worst was over. Idiot. After breakfast he left for work. Marina waited half an hour, then went upstairs to Dorothy's apartment. The old woman opened the door immediately, as if she'd been waiting. Come in, come in. I just took a pie out of the oven. The kitchen smelled of apples and cinnamon. Dorothy poured tea, cut 2 slices of pie, sat across from Marina, and looked her straight in the eyes. Tell me. And Marina told her everything. From beginning to end. Dorothy listened silently, only shaking her head now and then. When Marina finished, the old woman stared into her cup for a long time. I always knew he was a bad man, she finally said. Even when you'd just gotten married. Remember I told you? Marina remembered. Dorothy had said something like, "There's no kindness in his eyes, Marina." Are you sure? But Marina hadn't listened. She was young, in love, foolish. My David will help, Dorothy went on. He's a good boy, honest. He works as a detective, financial crimes. I'll call him today. Thank you, Marina took her hand. Thank you, Dorothy. I don't know what I'd do without you. Nonsense, the old woman waved it off. You'd manage. You're a strong girl. You always have been. David called that same evening. His voice was serious, professional. Marina, my aunt told me about your situation. I'd like to meet and look over the documents. Can you tomorrow? They met at a cafe near Marina's workplace, a quiet spot where they could talk without prying ears. David listened without interrupting, made notes in a small notebook, occasionally asked clarifying questions. So the money for your daughter's treatment, he transferred it to this woman's accounts? Yes. Here are the statements. David studied the documents carefully. Then he leaned back and rubbed the bridge of his nose. The situation is complicated. Formally, this is fraud. But proving intent to cause harm to health or life will be difficult. He never officially refused treatment. He just didn't provide the funds. He knew she would die without surgery. Marina's voice trembled. He planned it. Look his notes. She showed him the file with the plan. David read it, and his face hardened. This is more serious. If we prove he deliberately deprived the child of the chance to receive treatment, knowing the consequences, it could qualify as involvement in causing death through negligence, or even intentional bodily harm resulting in death. What should I do? For now, nothing. Behave as usual. I'll pass the information to my colleagues. We'll start an investigation. We already have material on this Vera. She's come up in several fraud cases. If we can connect everything. He didn't finish, but Marina understood. The following weeks turned into a strange game. During the day, Marina went to work, smiled at colleagues, hung IVs, filled out charts. In the evening she came home, cooked dinner for James, listened to his stories about work and projects. At night, when he fell asleep, she sat in the bathroom with her phone, texting David, reading case materials he sent her. Vera Kuzmina. 34 years old. Unmarried, no children. Born in a small town in Pennsylvania, moved to San Francisco right after high school. Studied economics but didn't finish, was expelled for poor performance. Worked odd jobs, secretary, administrator, sales manager. 5 years ago registered a business, opened an online supplement store that barely functioned, but large sums passed through its accounts. For men over those years. All married. All with family problems. All lost money. 2 withdrew their complaints after Vera returned part of the amount. 2 decided not to pursue it, afraid of scandal, publicity, shame. Marina read the files and wondered how he could have fallen for it. James, who always considered himself so smart, so perceptive, who looked down on her when she didn't understand his business terms. How could he not see he was being used? Then she remembered the messages. Vera knew exactly what to say. She knew which strings to pull. You deserve more. You're so talented. Your wife doesn't appreciate you. A sick child isn't your fault. She fed his ego like a starving beast, and he devoured everything she gave him. Or maybe it wasn't only Vera. Maybe James himself wanted to believe he was a victim of circumstances. That a sick daughter and an eternally exhausted wife were unfair to him. That he deserved better. Marina didn't know. And honestly, she didn't care. His motives, his feelings, his justifications, none of it mattered. Only one thing mattered: he had made a decision. A conscious, adult decision to let his daughter die so he could start a new life with another woman. He would pay for that. 3 weeks later, David called. "There's news. Can you come in?" This time they met not at a cafe, but at the police station, in a small room with gray walls and the smell of old paper. Besides David, there were 2 others: Detective Thomas, a heavy-set man with a mustache and tired eyes, and Detective Emily, a young woman in a tailored suit with short hair. "We've completed a preliminary investigation," Thomas began. "Kuzmina has indeed been systematically involved in fraud. We contacted 3 of her former clients, let's say. 2 agreed to testify. Total damages exceed $1 million. But your case is unique," Emily continued. "Your husband didn't just give money to a questionable business. He transferred funds intended to save a child's life. And his notes indicate he understood the consequences." Marina nodded. She knew this. But hearing it from officials made it different. More real. "We're prepared to open a criminal case," Thomas said. "Against Kuzmina for large-scale fraud. Against your husband as an accomplice, and on charges of involvement in causing death through negligence. But we need additional evidence. Doctor testimony. Medical records. And your testimony," Emily added. "As the victim." Marina looked at the 3 strangers who were ready to help her get justice. People who hadn't known Paulina, hadn't seen her smile, hadn't heard her laugh. But who were willing to do what had to be done. "I'll testify," Marina said. "And I'll provide the documents. I have everything saved." The next month was exhausting. Marina went to interrogations, met with a lawyer, spoke with doctors from the hospital where Paulina had been treated. The hematologist, the same one with kind eyes, remembered James's strange questions and agreed to testify. Nurses who had cared for Paulina confirmed that the father was rarely present in the room. A social worker from a Children's Aid Foundation testified that James had repeatedly declined offered financial assistance, saying he would handle it himself. All those little details came together into one big picture. A picture of a man who had consciously, methodically sentenced his own child to death. And James suspected nothing. He kept living his usual life, leaving in the morning, coming home in the evening, sometimes suggesting they go somewhere, get a change of scenery. Marina refused, said she wasn't ready. He shrugged and didn't insist. He was probably even glad less hassle. One night, about a week before the arrest, Marina couldn't sleep. She lay beside James, listening to his steady breathing, and thought about how it had come to this. How the man she had loved, lived with for 8 years, had a child with how he had turned into this. Had he always been this way, and she just hadn't seen it? Or had something broken along the way? She remembered the beginning of their relationship. Flowers, restaurants, beautiful words. She remembered the wedding, his confident smile as he slid the ring onto her finger. She remembered the first years of marriage, those rare moments of closeness when it felt like everything was fine. She remembered his face when Paulina was born, calm, indifferent, without the joy she had been waiting for. Maybe he had never loved her. Maybe she had just been convenient. A wife who kept the house, cooked meals, didn't ask too many questions. And when Paulina came along, a burden. One more mouth to feed. A problem. Marina turned onto her side, her back to him. Not her husband. Not anymore. Just a man who would soon cease to be her husband. Who would soon cease to be anyone in her life at all. And strangely enough, she didn't feel sad. There was no tearing sense of loss like after Paulina's death. Just emptiness. Cold, clean emptiness where love used to be. The arrest happened early on a Wednesday morning. Marina was in the kitchen, making coffee. James had just come out of the shower, still in his robe. The doorbell rang. "I'll get it," she said. Two uniformed officers stood at the door, with David in plain clothes beside them. A few other people hovered behind them. "James Lavrov?" one of the officers asked. James appeared in the hallway, still in his robe, hair wet. "Yes. That's me. What's going on?" "You are under arrest on suspicion of fraud and involvement in causing death through negligence. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say may be used against you in court." Marina stood by the wall and watched. Watched James go pale. Watched his jaw drop. Watched him try to say something and fail. Watched the handcuffs click shut. Watched them lead him toward the door. At the threshold, he turned around. His eyes were wild, uncomprehending. "Marina," he rasped. "This was you. You did this." She didn't answer. She just watched as they took him away. The door closed. Marina went back to the kitchen. The coffee had boiled over, spilled across the stovetop. She wiped it up with a cloth. Poured herself a cup of what was left. Sat down at the table and took a sip. The coffee was bitter, burnt. But it didn't matter. Nothing mattered anymore. She had done it. She had gotten justice. The trial began 3 months later. All that time James remained in custody. The judge denied bail, citing a flight risk. Marina filed for divorce the same day he was arrested. James's lawyer tried to contact her, suggested a peaceful settlement, but she didn't respond. There was nothing to discuss. Vera was arrested a week later. She tried to leave the country. She already had tickets to Turkey but was pulled off the plane right at the airport. During questioning, she denied everything, claimed James had offered her the money himself, said she hadn't known about the sick child, insisted she was being framed. But the messages spoke for themselves. Her words, her plans, her calculations, everything was documented. The trial lasted 2 months. Marina attended every hearing. She sat in the front row, looked at James thinner now, older, in a prison uniform and felt nothing. He tried to catch her eye, but she looked straight through him, as if through glass. Doctors testified. Nurses. Social workers. The messages were read aloud. Bank statements were shown. That same plan file was displayed. James's lawyer tried to argue that his client was a victim of manipulation by a cunning woman, that he hadn't understood the consequences of his actions, that he deeply regretted everything. The judge listened with a stone face. When it was Marina's turn to testify, she stood and spoke evenly, calmly, without tears. She told them about Paulina's illness, about raising the money, about the conversation when James said the money was gone, about her daughter's final weeks, about her death, about the call from the morgue, about the flash drive and the truth it contained. "Do you hate your ex-husband?" the lawyer asked during cross-examination. Marina paused. "No," she said. "I feel nothing toward him. He is nobody to me. Just a man who made a decision. And now he's responsible for it." The verdict was read on a Friday at 3 in the afternoon. The courtroom was full of journalists, onlookers, relatives of Vera's other victims. Marina sat between her mother and Dorothy. David stood by the wall, arms crossed. The judge, an elderly woman with a tired face, read the sentence in a monotone voice. To find James Lavrov guilty of large-scale fraud and involvement in causing death through negligence. To sentence him to 2 years of imprisonment in a general regime correctional facility. 2 years. Marina didn't know whether that was a lot or too little. Probably too little. 2 years for a child's life. But the prosecutor had warned her there was no direct intent to kill, only negligence and inaction. Legally one thing, morally something else entirely. To find Vera Kuzmina guilty of large-scale fraud. To sentence her to 4 years of imprisonment in a general regime correctional facility. Vera jumped up, started shouting about injustice, about conspiracies, about being set up. Guards escorted her out. James sat motionless, staring at the floor. When it was over, Marina walked out of the courthouse and stopped on the steps. It was a warm fall day. Sunlight filtered through yellow leaves. Somewhere in the distance, music was playing. Barbara came up and hugged her. "You did it, sweetheart. Paulina would be proud of you." Marina closed her eyes and let herself just breathe for a few seconds. Just exist. Then she opened her eyes and smiled for the first time in many months. Let's go home, Mom. I want pie. Barbara laughed through her tears. You'll have pie. With cabbage, just the way you like it. They walked down the street together, two women young and old, daughter and mother. Behind them lay the trial, the sentence, the past. Ahead was life. New, unfamiliar, frightening. But life. Marina sold the apartment she'd shared with James 6 months later. She couldn't stay there anymore. Every corner reminded her of the past. Of Paulina that was painful, but bright. Of James that was just disgusting. She packed up her daughter's things, toys, drawings, books, and took them to her mother's place. The rest she gave away or threw out. Her new apartment was small but cozy, a studio in a new building with large windows overlooking a park. Marina furnished it to her own taste, light walls, lots of plants, and on the shelf by the window a framed photo of Paulina and the stuffed bear Masheka. Every morning, when she woke up, she saw her daughter smile and said, "Good morning, sweetheart." Work helped keep her mind occupied. Marina returned to the hospital, took extra shifts. At first her colleagues looked at her cautiously. Everyone knew about the trial, about what had happened, but gradually they got used to it. She was a good nurse, attentive and patient. Patients loved her. Dorothy stopped by every week, bringing pies, sharing courtyard gossip, complaining about the weather and politicians. Marina listened, nodded, sometimes smiled. The old woman became like a second grandmother to her, the one she'd never had. David came by too. At first it was business papers to sign, additional testimony to give. Then just because, bringing coffee, asking how she was doing. Marina noticed the way he looked at her, but pretended not to. She wasn't ready. Not yet. A year passed. Then another. Life slowly began to mend, like a broken bone that heals slowly but surely. The pain never went away, it simply became part of Marina, like a scar you carry forever. But alongside the pain, something else appeared. Calm. Acceptance. Maybe even hope. One spring day, it was the 3rd year after Paulina's death, Marina went to the cemetery and saw an unfamiliar woman there. Not young, wearing a black coat, holding a bouquet of white roses. The woman stood by a neighboring grave and cried quietly, silently, only her shoulders trembling. Marina approached and sat down beside her. "Are you okay?" The woman looked up with tear-filled eyes. "My son. A year ago. An accident." Marina nodded. She knew that feeling. Knew how unbearable it was when someone who was supposed to outlive you was gone. "My daughter," she said. 3 years ago. Illness. They sat there together, two mothers who had lost children. They didn't talk. Sometimes words aren't needed. The woman eventually left, and Marina stayed behind. She placed flowers on Paulina's grave, straightened the photo, brushed away dry leaves. "Hi, sweetheart. It's a good day today. The sun is shining, birds are singing. You would have loved a day like this." She paused. "You know, I met a woman today. She lost her child too. And I thought about how many of us there are. The ones who stayed alive after those we loved. We walk the streets, smile, work, talk, and no one knows there's a huge hole inside us that will never be filled." Marina wiped her tears. They flowed on their own, without sobbing. "But you know what? I'm not angry anymore. Not at fate. Not at life. Not even at him. Anger burns you from the inside, and I want to live. For you. For your memory. So that one day, when we meet again, I can tell you everything that happened after." She smiled. "And I will. I promise." That same evening Marina called David. "Hi. It's Marina. I was thinking. Maybe we could go somewhere? A movie, or just take a walk? If you're not busy." A pause on the other end of the line. Then a voice with a smile in it. "I'm not busy. Not at all." They walked along the waterfront until it got dark. Talked about everything and nothing: work, books, summer plans. David talked about a case he'd recently closed, some real estate fraud scheme. Marina talked about her patients, about an old man who brought her candy every day, about a girl with a broken leg who dreamed of becoming a ballerina. When night fell, they stopped by the bay. The water shimmered in the streetlights, music played somewhere in the distance. "Thank you," Marina said. "For what?" "For everything. For helping back then. For not giving up. For just being there." David turned toward her. In the light of the street lamp, his eyes looked almost pale. "I'll be there for as long as you want," he said. Marina studied him closely, as if seeing him for the first time. Then she took his hand. "Shall we?" she said softly. "Walk me home?" They walked through the empty streets hand in hand. Marina thought about how strangely life is put together. How strength is born from pain. How light comes from darkness. How one story grows out of another. The story wasn't over. It was continuing. And that felt right. Another year passed, the fourth year without Paulina, and Marina and David got married. The wedding was quiet and modest, just her mom, Dorothy, and a few close friends. Marina wore a simple white dress and tucked a sprig of lily of the valley into her hair. Paulina had loved Lily of the Valley. On the table, beside the cake, stood a photo of a little girl with golden braids. "She would be happy for you," Barbara said, hugging her daughter. "I know, Mom. I know." A year later, little Paulina was born. Marina was afraid during the pregnancy, afraid she wouldn't cope, afraid everything would repeat itself, afraid fate would punish her again. But David was there. Every minute. Every day. He went with her to every appointment, got up at night when morning sickness made her miserable, rubbed her back and whispered, "Everything will be fine. I'm here." The delivery was easy, 3 hours, and it was over. When the midwife placed the tiny warm body on her chest, Marina cried. But these were different tears. Bright. Joyful. "Hello, Paulina," she whispered. "Welcome to the world." The baby opened her eyes gray, like her father's, and looked at her. There was something ancient and wise in that gaze, as if a soul that had lived many lives had finally found its home. Little Paulina grew up healthy and happy. From her first Paulina she inherited a love of drawing, from her father, a serious, thoughtful nature. At 3 she already knew all her letters and numbers, at 4 she read simple books. Grandma Barbara adored her, spoiled her with candy and pies. Dorothy knitted her socks and hats. David carried her on his shoulders and told stories about brave princesses who saved the world themselves. And Marina looked at her family and thought, this is happiness. Quiet, unflashy, gentle, domestic, real. The kind she had reached through pain and loss. The kind that once seemed impossible. But life is astonishing. It takes and it gives in return. Not always equally. Not always fairly. But it gives. When little Paulina turned 6, the same age the first Paulina had been when she passed, Marina walked her to school. A pink unicorn backpack. A pencil case shaped like a cat. White bows in her hair. The girl stood by the school gate, staring at the building with excitement and awe. "Mom, will it be interesting in there?" "It will, sweetheart. Very interesting. And you'll pick me up after class?" "Of course. I'll be waiting right here." Paulina nodded, hugged her mom, and ran toward the school. On the steps she turned around and waved. Marina waved back. Then she stood there, watching her daughter disappear behind the doors, alive, healthy, full of hope. And she thought about the other little girl who had wanted so badly to go to school but never got the chance. "I did it, sweetheart," she whispered, looking up at the sky. "I'm living. For both of us." Somewhere high above the clouds, it seemed to her that someone was smiling. Marina wiped her tears and went home. Her husband was waiting, having made breakfast. Her mom was there, visiting. Life was waiting for her. And she stepped forward to meet it. Years flew by like leaves in the wind. Little Paulina grew up, graduated from school with honors, and was accepted into medical school. "I want to be like you, Mom," she said. Marina cried with pride when her daughter received her diploma. David hugged them both and kept repeating, "My girls. My smart girls." Barbara lived to see her great-granddaughter defend her PhD. She sat in the front row, small and gray-haired, smiling so broadly that crow's feet fanned out from her eyes. A year later she passed away quietly, in her sleep, just as she'd wanted. Marina buried her beside her father and her first Paulina. Now there were 3 graves in the cemetery. 3 names. 3 lives. Dorothy had passed even earlier. At her funeral, Marina carried a wreath and thought about apple pies, tea in porcelain cups, embroidered tablecloths. About how much that woman had meant in her life. About how, without her, there might have been nothing, no truth, no justice, no new life. James was released from prison after a year and a half, early, for good behavior. Marina heard about it by chance, from former neighbors. They said he'd gone somewhere to Alaska, taking a rotation job. They said he drank. They said he'd aged beyond recognition. She didn't check. His life no longer touched hers. Vera served her full sentence 4 years. Then she got out and 6 months later was caught for fraud again. This time with real estate. She got 7 years. Marina read about it in the news and just shook her head. Some people never change. But there were others. Those who did change. Those who grew and became better. Paulina, the younger Paulina, now fully grown, became a pediatric hematologist. She worked at the very hospital where her sister had once been treated. She saved children with the same illnesses, gave hope to mothers just like Marina had once been. "This is my calling," she said. "I feel like I'm meant to do this." She had 2 children, Ben and Emma. A red-haired boy and a dark-haired girl. Marina babysat her grandchildren, sang them lullabies, told them stories. Sometimes stories about a brave girl with golden braids who loved to draw. "Grandma, was she real?" Ben would ask. "She was, sweetheart. She was. And she always will be, as long as we remember her." David retired when he turned 60. His health had started to falter after so many years in the police force. But he didn't complain. He cooked, played with the grandkids, took Marina to the theater and concerts. "We earned this," he would say. "We earned the right to just live." And they lived. Simply lived. Each day as a gift. One evening, Marina was already over 70. She sat on the balcony with an old photo album, flipping through the pages, looking at faces. Her mom young and beautiful. Her dad, whom she barely remembered. Herself in a school uniform with white bows. Paulina, the first Paulina, on a swing, mouth wide open with laughter. Ben ran out onto the balcony. He was 8 now, red-haired, covered in freckles. "Grandma, what are you looking at?" "Photos, sweetheart." "Want to see?" He climbed onto her lap, pressed his warm head under her chin. Marina showed him the pictures, told him stories. About childhood. About her parents. About first love and first losses. About how important it is to be honest and brave. About how life can be unfair but is always worth living. "Grandma, are you happy?" Ben asked. Marina thought about it. Was she happy? After everything she'd been through? After the pain, the losses, the betrayal? She looked at the sunset. The sky was pink, golden, fiery, just like the little girl with golden braids used to draw it. "Yes, sweetheart," she said. "I'm happy." And it was true. That night she had a dream. She was standing on the shore of the sea, warm, gentle, like on that trip to Miami so many years ago. Water lapped at her feet. The sun was sinking beyond the horizon. And a little girl was running toward her. Small, with golden braids, in a pink swimsuit. She was laughing, waving her arms, her laughter like music. "Mommy," she called. "Mommy, look how beautiful the sunset is." Marina reached out her arms and woke up. Dawn was breaking outside the window. David was still asleep beside her, breathing softly. In the next room, her granddaughter Emma Russellcheat stayed the night. Marina got up, slipped on her robe, and went out onto the balcony. The city was waking up below, the first cars, the first pedestrians, the first sounds of a new day. "Good morning, sweetheart," she whispered to the sky. "The sun is waking up." And she smiled. Life went on. in all its pain and beauty, and loss and gain, and tears and laughter. It flowed like a river, sometimes wild, sometimes calm, but always forward. And Marina flowed with it. All the way to the very end, which, as she now knew, was not an end at all, but the beginning of something new. On the last day of her life she lived to be 92. Marina lay in bed, surrounded by her family. Her daughter held her hand. Grandchildren and great-grandchildren stood nearby. David had passed 5 years earlier, but Marina wasn't sad. She knew she would see him again soon. "Mom," Paulina whispered, her daughter, grown, gray-haired now, with fine lines around her eyes, looking at her with such love it made her heart ache. "Mom, can you hear me?" "I hear you, sweetheart. Everything's fine. I'm ready." "Ready for what, Grandma?" That was Emma, now a mother herself. "Home," Marina replied. "They're waiting for me there." She closed her eyes and saw light, warm, golden, like a sunset over the sea. And in that light, a little girl. Small, with golden braids, and a pink dress. "Mommy," the girl cried, running toward her. "Mommy, I waited for you so long. Come on, I'll show you castles, real castles, like in fairy tales." Marina laughed, a young, ringing laugh she hadn't laughed in many, many years, lifted her daughter into her arms and held her close. "Let's go, sweetheart. Let's go." And they went together, forever, to where the sun never sets, where there is no pain or tears, where love never ends. And on earth remained those who loved them. And they went on living for them, because of them, together with them. Because that's how life works. It goes on. Always.